Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive on a really fascinating figure, Leon Trotsky.
Mm-hmm.
And our main source for this deep dive is going to be the biography by Robert Service.
Great.
And he consulted, a wealth of sources for this book, including, other historians and experts who weighed in on Trotsky's life.
Right.
But our mission today is to kind of go beyond the sort of familiar image, of Trotsky as just kind of a revolutionary firebrand,
Mm-hmm.
and to understand, what really shaped his worldview,
Yeah.
like what motivated his choices and why his story, I think, still resonates with people today.
Well, it's a fascinating journey.
Yeah.
And it all starts in a kind of an unexpected place, I think, for a lot of people.
Okay.
The shtetls of the Pale settlement in the late 19th century.
Okay.
These Jewish communities within the Russian Empire, it was a very unique blend of tradition and modernity.
Mm-hmm.
And they were grappling with a lot of the same issues that we see, throughout history and even today.
Mm-hmm.
Anti-Semitism and the pull of new ideologies.
Although not exactly like the typical breeding ground you think of for like a revolutionary leader.
Right. Not really the hotbed of revolution that you might expect.
Right.
But Trotsky's family also adds like another layer of complexity to this.
Okay.
His father, David Bronstein, was a successful farmer,
Mm-hmm.
not particularly religious,
Okay.
and his mother, Anita, had connections to the more cosmopolitan city of Odessa.
Oh, okay.
So this exposed young Trotsky, born Liba Bronstein,
Mm-hmm.
to a wider world of ideas and experiences outside of the shtetl.
It sounds like a family that, really encouraged independent thinking.
Definitely they were,
Mm.
very much free thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
Trotsky even recounts in his autobiography overhearing his parents discussing atheism,
Wow.
which was very unusual for the time.
Yeah.
And this intellectual openness, that he had in his family life, it really sort of influenced his early development
Yeah.
and exposed him to various currents of thought,
Mm-hmm.
from populism to early socialism, even before he encountered Marxism.
So how did this young, intellectually curious, Liba,
Right.
from this sort of unconventional background,
Yeah.
how did he become the revolutionary we know as Trotsky?
Well,
What were some of those key turning points, do you think?
yeah, I mean, there were several, but one that stands out, I think,
Okay.
is his experience with a skilled craftsman named Ivan Vasilovich Grabin.
Okay.
Grabin instilled in Liba like a deep respect for the working class,
Mm-hmm.
which would become central to his revolutionary vision later.
Right.
And then later, at St. Paul's School in Nikolaev,
Okay.
Liba encountered rampant anti-Semitism,
Oh, wow.
which fueled his lifelong contempt for bullies and injustice of all kinds, really.
So those early experiences kind of planted those seeds of rebellion.
Exactly, they did.
Yeah.
And those seeds began to sprout, I think you could say, when Liba first encountered Marxist ideas.
Okay.
It wasn't an immediate conversion, though. He initially gravitated toward other thinkers, like Nikolai Mikhailovsky.
Mm-hmm.
But interestingly, his friend Alexandria Sokolovskaya
Okay.
was ahead of the curve.
Mm-hmm.
She was the only one in their circle who had actually read Marx's Capital
Oh, wow.
at that point.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what shifted him towards Marxism then?
Well, to understand that, I think we have to consider the broader context
Yeah.
of early Russian Marxism.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this was a dynamic and contested field.
Okay.
There were debates raging between figures like Georgy Plekhanov
Okay.
and the Emancipation of Labor Group,
Mm-hmm.
who emphasized the role of the working class in the revolution,
Okay.
versus the Narodniks,
Mm-hmm.
who focused on the peasantry.
Okay.
And then, of course, you had the urgence of Lenin,
Right.
whose writings would have a profound impact on young Liba
Yeah.
and really shape his thinking.
That's interesting. So this is like a really, like a melting pot of intellectual thought.
Exactly. It was an
Yeah.
exciting time
Yeah.
to be a young revolutionary.
And it's fascinating to think about Trotsky in this context, right?
Yeah.
Not just as the leader that we think of him as, but, as this young man
Right.
grappling with all these
Mhm.
very complex ideas.
Yeah, and that grappling sort of took a practical turn
Okay.
when Liba helped to form the Rasadnik,
Huh.
or Seed Plot Society in Nikolaev.
Ah, interesting.
They were engaged in raising funds,
Mm-hmm.
spreading awareness,
Okay.
and essentially laying the groundwork for a future revolution.
So they weren't just like armchair revolutionaries. They were really trying to make change.
They were very active,
Yeah.
but their activities attracted the attention of the Okhrana, the
Uh-oh.
Tsarist secret police.
Right.
and they were infiltrated by an informer,
Wow.
which led to Leiba's arrest
Okay.
and imprisonment in Odessa.
So I imagine imprisonment must have been a pretty harsh reality check.
I'm sure it was
Yeah.
for a young revolutionary,
Yeah.
but it was also a really formative experience for him. I mean, he used these really ingenious methods to communicate with other inmates tapping on the walls with a prison alphabet.
Wow.
And despite the noisy gendarmes who were, keeping him up at night,
Oh, gosh.
he delved even deeper into Marxist theory.
Mm-hmm.
It was in prison that he really solidified his commitment to the revolution.
So a period of both hardship and intellectual growth.
Yeah, you could definitely say that.
Yeah.
And even in these conditions, his intellectual curiosity really flourished.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote a manuscript in prison comparing Freemasons to the Narodniks,
Oh, wow.
which was sadly lost.
Oh, no.
But it offers this really, tantalizing glimpse, I think,
Yeah.
into his early interest in symbolism and veiled criticism.
So interesting to think about him writing in those conditions.
Yeah.
And, his journey's far from over.
Of course.
Imprisonment's really just one chapter in what is going to be
Yeah.
an incredibly dramatic life.
Absolutely.
And-
One of the most dramatic chapters is about to begin.
Okay.
His exile to Siberia.
To Siberia.
So that's where we'll leave off for now.
Sounds good. Siberia in the early 1900s? I mean, can you imagine
Yeah.
the vast frozen landscape, the harsh conditions,
Yeah.
the sense of isolation?
Right.
This is where we find Leiba, now exiled, with his pregnant wife, Alexandra.
I mean, that's such a contrast, right? From all this intellectual stimulation
Right.
back in those, pre-revolutionary circles
A huge shift.
to the middle of nowhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're right. But even in this remote outpost, Leiba finds himself among a small community
Oh, well.
of other revolutionaries.
You just,
Think of it as this kind of microcosm
yeah.
of the larger movement with all of its, ideological debates
Mm-hmm.
and personal dynamics.
Oh.
Even Service mentions this cobbler named Miksha,
Oh.
who apparently had a fondness for vodka.
So even in exile,
Yeah,
they find those human connections.
they do.
Yeah.
It reminds you that these are real people,
Yeah.
not just names in a history book.
And Leiba, heir to the intellectual,
Yep.
continues to write,
Mm-hmm.
honing his skills,
Mhm.
developing his ideas.
Okay.
He even uses a pseudonym, Anti-Odo,
Wow.
and he even contributes to a liberal journal based in Irkutsk.
Interesting.
He was really a master of satire,
Mm-hmm.
sarcasm, engaging with a wider audience beyond just the kind of revolutionary circles.
Yeah.
It reminds you that he wasn't just a fiery orator, but a gifted writer
Yeah.
with a very sharp wit.
Yeah, it's cool to see that that talent for communication developing so early on. Mm-hmm. It sounds like he was somebody who could really connect with people,
Yes.
regardless of background.
Absolutely.
But Siberia wasn't his final destination, obviously. Tell me about his escape.
Okay, picture this Leiba bundled up against the Siberian cold,
Yeah.
riding out of exile in a hay cart
Wow.
with a female companion.
That sounds like something out of a movie or something.
It does, right?
Yeah.
Not exactly the most comfortable or inconspicuous
Right.
mode of transport.
And the adventure continues,
Yes.
I imagine.
He makes his way to Irkutsk,
Okay.
secures passage on the Trans-Siberian Railway,
Wow.
and eventually arrives in Geneva.
Wow.
He even had the foresight to acquire some more civilized attire
Okay.
before rejoining the world of European intellectuals.
Interesting.
Yeah,
So he makes his way back to the heart of the revolutionary movement.
he does.
And this is where he finally meets Lenin, right?
This is it.
Okay.
This is the meeting that would shape the course of history.
Wow.
Lenin, upon hearing of Leiba's arrival, supposedly exclaimed, "Ah, the pen has arrived."
The pen. I love that nickname.
I know, it's great.
It just really captures that intellectual prowess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
And it foreshadows his influence
Yeah.
as a writer and a propagandist.
Yeah, for sure.
So Leiba, or the pen, as he was now known,
Mm-hmm.
wasted no time in making his mark.
Okay.
He contributed to the Iskra organization,
Mm-hmm.
a revolutionary newspaper founded by Lenin,
Okay.
and he offered these very blunt critiques,
Mm-hmm.
which Lenin seemed to appreciate.
Okay.
He wasn't one to shy away from voicing his opinions,
Right.
even challenging established figures like Georgy Plekhanov,
Okay.
who was a leading Marxist theorist at the time,
Mm-hmm.
who considered the pen a little too brash
Oh, really?
for his liking.
It sounds like those early interactions really show those, core personality traits.
Yes.
That sharp intellect, the boldness,
Mhm.
the unwavering, self-assurance
Yeah.
that would define his leadership.
Absolutely. He was a force to be reckoned with,
Yeah.
a rising star in the revolutionary movement.
And his attendance at the Second Congress of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party,
Yes.
where that famous split between the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks occurs,
Right.
further solidifies his position. And this is where he adopts the name that we know him by today,
Yes.
Leon Trotsky.
Leon Trotsky.
So from Leiba,
Yeah.
the intellectually curious youth,
Right.
to the pen, the rising revolutionary writer,
Mm-hmm.
to Leon Trotsky, the name that will become synonymous with revolution.
Yes.
It's a really remarkable transformation.
It is.
So how did this newly christened Trotsky
Right.
navigate those turbulent years leading up to the revolution?
Well, the Russo-Japanese War, I think, was a real turning point for him.
Okay.
Trotsky saw it as a sign that revolution in Russia was inevitable. He was eager to return home and join the struggle.
Okay.
But the Mensheviks, whom he was aligned with at the time, urged caution.
Okay.
So instead, he remained in Europe, and he published his very controversial pamphlet, Results and Prospects, which outlined his theory of permanent revolution.
So that's a theory that argues that a socialist revolution in Russia can only succeed
Yes.
if it sparks revolutions in other more advanced capitalist countries, right?
That's it.
Okay.
Very bold.
Yeah,
Very controversial idea.
for sure.
It really sets him apart from both the Mensheviks and the Bolsheviks.
Okay.
But then comes Bloody Sunday in 1905,
Yeah.
a massacre that ignites the 1905 revolution. Trotsky, true to his nature, doesn't hesitate.
Right.
He rushes back to Russia, putting himself at the heart of the revolutionary fervor.
He was clearly a man of action.
He was.
To center the storm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He becomes a leader in the St. Petersburg Soviet,
Okay.
a council of workers' representatives, and he develops the concept of a workers' government.
Interesting.
So he's putting his theoretical ideas into practice.
Yeah.
But the 1905 revolution is ultimately crushed,
Okay.
leading to Trotsky's second exile.
Wow.
This time he finds himself in Vienna,
Okay.
observing the rising nationalism and ethnic tensions in the Balkans, which he saw as very dangerous,
Yeah.
important of things to come.
Almost like a premonition.
You could say that. He was
Yeah.
deeply troubled by the rising tide of nationalism,
Yeah.
and he saw it as a threat to the internationalist ideals of socialism.
Right.
And when the war did erupt in 1914, his response was unequivocal. Vehement opposition. He became the editor of an anti-war newspaper in Paris,
Okay.
Nash Slovo,
Okay.
and he used his writing to rally opposition to the conflict.
Yeah.
This, of course, didn't sit well with the French authorities,
Right.
leading to the paper's suppression
Oh.
and Trotsky's deportation.
So exiled again,
Exiled again.
forced to wander.
Yeah.
Where does he end up this time?
This time he makes his way to New York City,
Okay.
joining a community of socialist exiles.
Okay.
Initially, he's met with a somewhat lukewarm reception,
Okay.
but his powerful oratory skills soon win over the crowds.
So even in exile, his voice couldn't be silenced.
Couldn't be.
Yeah.
He is a man who seemed to thrive on challenges, constantly adapting and evolving. And then in 1917,
Yeah.
the world changes.
It does.
Revolution erupts in Russia,
Mm-hmm.
and Trotsky sees his chance to return and play a decisive role.
So he's not just going back to his homeland.
No.
He's going back with a vision.
He has a vision
He has,
Right.
absolutely.
for the future of Russia.
The February Revolution topples the Tsar, but the provisional government that replaces it is very weak,
Okay,
unstable.
right.
Trotsky, sensing an opportunity, returns to Russia,
Okay.
immediately assesses the situation, and advocates for Soviet power,
So
a system where workers' councils would hold the real reins of government.
interesting.
He throws himself into the revolutionary maelstrom,
Yeah.
rallying support for the Bolsheviks, and ultimately plays a key role in the October Revolution,
Wow.
which brings them to power.
I mean, it's almost unbelievable, right? From Siberian exile
know.
to leading a revolution
It's amazing.
in just a few years.
Yeah,
I mean, it's incredible.
it is.
A real testament to his resilience and his belief in his cause. But leading a revolution is one thing.
Yes.
Governing a nation is another.
Very different.
What happens next in this saga?
Well, with the Bolsheviks in power, Trotsky is tasked with negotiating peace.
With the Central Powers at Brest-Litovsk.
Okay.
Remember, Russia is still embroiled in World War I,
Right.
and the situation is dire.
Okay.
It's a very difficult
Yeah.
and ultimately humiliating negotiation
Mm-hmm.
as Russia is forced to cede vast territories
Oh, wow.
and pay heavy indemnities.
It sounds like a necessary but painful compromise.
It was a heavy price to pay.
Yeah, a taste of the, complexities and compromises that
Yep.
often accompany revolutions.
Absolutely.
But he doesn't have much time to dwell on this
No, he doesn't.
because civil war erupts,
Civil War breaks out,
pitting the Bolsheviks
right?
again.
All these different factions,
The whole coalition of forces.
white armies, foreign interventionists,
Yeah.
even rebellious peasant factions.
Wow. So from negotiating peace
Wow.
to leading an army,
He's thrown into the fire.
it's another, dramatic turn
It is.
in this already dramatic life.
He's appointed People's Commissar for Military and Naval Affairs,
Wow.
tasked with building and leading the Red Army. He proves to be a brilliant military leader,
Yep.
traveling tirelessly by train,
Mm-hmm.
visiting the front lines,
Yeah.
rallying the troops,
Mm-hmm.
making crucial strategic decisions.
His armored train kind of becomes this symbol, doesn't it? Of
Yes,
his leadership
it does.
and the Red Army's determination.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's ruthless in pursuit of victory.
Okay.
He even orders the execution of deserters, a decision that would later be used against him.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no denying his effectiveness.
Yeah.
He instills discipline, he attracts talented officers,
Mm-hmm.
and he ultimately leads the Bolsheviks to victory in the Civil War.
Wow, what an achievement.
It is.
But of course, that's just the beginning of another chapter, right?
Yeah, right.
The challenges of peacetime leadership, I imagine, are often even more complex
And they are.
than those of war.
Much more.
How does Trotsky fare in this new arena?
Well, as you might expect,
Yeah.
it's a period of immense challenges and
Mhm.
growing tensions. The country is devastated by war.
Of course.
The economy is in shambles.
Right.
And the ideological debates within the Bolshevik Party intensify.
Okay.
Trotsky finds himself increasingly at odds with Lenin
Okay.
over the new economic policy, or NEP.
That was Lenin's attempt, right, to revive the Soviet economy
Yes.
by allowing some elements of capitalism.
Right.
Kind of a strategic retreat.
It was from
Yeah.
pure communism.
Okay.
Lenin saw it as a necessary compromise,
Okay.
a temporary measure
Mm-hmm.
to get the country back on its feet.
But Trotsky, the more ideologically rigid of the two,
Yes.
saw it as a betrayal
Yes.
for the revolution.
A dangerous concession
Yeah.
to capitalist forces.
So like a really fundamental clash of visions
Yes.
for the future of the Soviet Union.
Exactly.
And it's not just Lenin, right?
Yeah.
There's also this looming presence
There is.
of Stalin, who's
Okay.
quietly consolidating power within the party.
He's a very shrewd operator.
Right.
It's during this time that the seeds of the rivalry between Trotsky and Stalin are sown.
Mm-hmm.
A rivalry that will have profound consequences for both men
Yeah.
and for the Soviet Union.
And to complicate matters further,
Yes,
Trotsky's health starts to deteriorate
it does.
at this time.
Yes.
So really bad timing.
Terrible timing.
Illness, ideological clashes,
Mhm.
and this rising rival in the form of Stalin.
A perfect storm.
Yeah.
It was a very precarious moment for Trotsky.
Yeah.
And with Lenin's health also failing,
Mm-hmm.
a power vacuum emerges at the top of the party.
So that is where we'll pick up in part 3.
Sounds good.
So we left off with Trotsky facing all these challenges, right?
Yeah.
His health failing, this ideological clash with Lenin, and this rising rival in the form of Stalin.
Right, a very precarious situation.
What happens when Lenin, the glue that's kind of holding the party together, passes away?
Well, Lenin's death in 1924 creates this power vacuum.
Yeah.
And the struggle for control of the Soviet Union really intensifies.
Mm-hmm.
This is a pivotal moment. And Stalin, being a master of political maneuvering,
Right.
he seizes the opportunity.
Yeah.
And he very skillfully outmaneuvers his rivals,
Mm-hmm.
including Trotsky, consolidates his power within the party,
Yeah.
and ultimately emerges as the undisputed leader of the Soviet Union.
So how does Trotsky react to this? I mean, does he just accept defeat?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Trotsky was a fighter,
Yeah.
and he challenged Stalin at every turn,
Okay.
criticized his policies, his authoritarian tendencies,
Yeah.
his betrayal of the revolution's ideals.
Mm-hmm.
But Stalin was ruthless,
Yeah.
and he launched this systematic campaign to discredit and isolate Trotsky.
It's a chilling reminder, isn't it, of how quickly revolutionary ideals
Yeah,
can turn into political purges.
it's tragic, really. It's a
Mhm.
tragic example of how power can corrupt
Yeah.
even the most dedicated revolutionaries.
So what happens to Trotsky?
Well, Trotsky supporters are purged from the party. His writings are banned.
Wow.
and his name becomes synonymous with treason.
So he goes from being, this leading figure of the revolution to like,
Public enemy number one.
yeah.
Exactly.
Wow.
And in 1929, he's exiled from the Soviet Union.
Exiled again.
Exiled again.
This time from the revolution that he helped to create.
Ironic, isn't it?
Yeah, it's got to be a devastating blow.
It was a crushing blow for him.
Yeah.
But even in exile, Trotsky remained a very potent symbol of resistance.
Okay.
He continues to write organized speak out against Stalin, and he becomes a beacon for anti-Stalinist communists around the world.
So he never gives up on this vision.
Never gives up of a world transformed by socialist revolution.
But I imagine his life in exile is pretty precarious.
It was extremely precarious.
Yeah.
He moved from country to country, Turkey, France, Norway, always under threat from Stalin's agents. And the long arm of Stalin's terror even reached his family.
Oh, wow.
In 1937, his son, Lev Sedov, who was also a prominent Trotskyist, died under very mysterious circumstances in Paris.
Oh, wow.
Almost certainly murdered by the NKVD.
That's horrifying.
Stalin's secret police.
Yeah. A real reminder of the human cost of political repression.
Absolutely a devastating loss for Trotsky.
Yeah.
And a stark reminder that he and his followers were not safe anywhere in the world.
So this brings us to Mexico, right?
Yes.
The final chapter of Trotsky's life, he finds refuge in Mexico City.
He does, thanks to the support of the painter Diego Rivera and the Mexican government.
But even there, he's not safe.
Not safe.
It seems like Stalin's really determined to silence him.
Permanently.
Yeah.
He wants him gone.
Wow.
In August 1940, a Soviet agent named Ramon Mercader, using the alias Jacques Mornard, gained access to Trotsky's compound and brutally murdered him with an ice axe.
A chilling end to a very tumultuous life.
It was.
So what are we to make of Trotsky's legacy?
Right. What is his legacy?
Is he a hero? Is he a villain?
It's a good question.
Or something in between?
It's a question that historians continue to grapple with.
Yeah.
And he was a brilliant writer and orator, a charismatic leader, a passionate advocate for social justice.
Yeah.
But he was also ruthless and authoritarian, willing to use violence to achieve his revolutionary goals.
So his life really embodies those complexities.
It does.
And contradictions of revolution.
Yes.
The idealism, the brutality, the hope.
Right.
And the despair.
I think his story is ultimately a tragic one.
Yeah.
A cautionary tale about the perils of power and the corrosive effects of ideological fanaticism.
Yeah, but there's also something heroic about him too, right?
There is absolutely.
This unwavering commitment to his ideals.
Yes.
The courage to challenge those in power.
Absolutely.
The willingness to sacrifice everything for his vision of a better world.
I think it's a legacy that continues to fascinate and provoke us.
Yeah.
He dared to dream big, to fight for his beliefs, and to challenge the status quo, even when it cost him everything.
Even though his vision of a socialist utopia remains unfulfilled.
Yeah.
I mean, his ideas and his story continue to inspire debate and discussion.
They do.
And it reminds us of that enduring human struggle for justice and equality.
You put it beautifully. I think Trotsky's life, with all of its triumphs and tragedies, reminds us that history is not a simple narrative of heroes and villains.
Right.
It's much more complex than that.
Yeah.
It's messy.
Yeah.
It's this tapestry woven from idealism, ambition, betrayal, and the enduring human search, I think, for meaning and purpose.
It's a story that challenges us to think critically about the nature of revolution, right?
It does.
The role of ideology and the human cost of political extremism.
All very important questions.
And Trotsky's legacy is complex and contested.
For sure.
But there's no doubt that he left an indelible mark on history.
Absolutely. And I would add that it's a legacy that continues to resonate, I think, today.
Yeah.
Reminding us of the importance of fighting for what we believe in, even in the face of overwhelming odds.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that ideas have power.
Yeah.
And that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can endure and strive for a better world.
Well, thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the life of Leon Trotsky.
My pleasure.
It's been a fascinating and I think really thought-provoking journey.
It has been.
And as we conclude, I'm kind of left with one final provocative question.
Okay.
How might the course of the 20th century have unfolded differently if Trotsky, not Stalin, had succeeded Lenin?
That is the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the question that historians continue to debate.
It really makes you think about all the different paths
Right.
that history could have taken.
And the contingent nature of history.
Yeah.
Right? The role of chance and individual choice in shaping the world we live in.
Yeah, and that the past isn't just some prologue to the present, but it's, a source of insights and lessons
Like that.
that can help us navigate the challenges and uncertainties of our own time.
Well said.
Well, thank you again for sharing your expertise with us today.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
It's been a really enlightening conversation.
Thank you for having me.
And to our listeners out there, I encourage you to delve deeper into Trotsky's writings.
Yes.
His ideas, the debates surrounding his legacy. I think it's a journey of discovery that will challenge your assumptions.
It will.
Expand your understanding of history.
For sure.
And perhaps even inspire you to question the world around you.
I hope so.
After all, as Trotsky himself once said, life is not a game of chess. But the board is limited, the pieces are limited, and the moves are limited.
Wow.
But within those limitations, we each strive to make our mark on the world.
That's a powerful thought to leave us with.
It is. Thank you. Thank you again for joining us on the Deep Dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those big questions.
Keep questioning.